Welcome to the channel The Coin Hunter, and today we're diving into something that might sound absolutely impossible at first. But trust me, what if I told you that a simple quarter from 1998, yes, just a regular Washington quarter that you could have received as change at a grocery store, could actually be worth up to $120 million? Now I know what you're thinking. That's insane. That can't be real. But before you dismiss this, you need to understand that the world of rare coins operates on a completely different level than most people realize. And the 1998 D. Washington Quarter is one of those mysterious pieces that has collectors, investors, and numismatists going absolutely crazy trying to find one in pristine condition with the exact error characteristics that make it worth a fortune. This isn't just about a coin. This is about a potential life-changing discovery that could be hiding in your old piggy bank, your grandmother's collection, or even in a jar of loose change that's been sitting in your closet for decades. The 1998 D. Washington Quarter represents something truly extraordinary in the numismatic world. And by the end of this video, you'll know exactly what to look for, why this particular quarter has such an astronomical value, and how you could potentially be the next person to discover one of these incredibly rare treasures. But here's the thing, and this is crucial. You need to stay with me until the very end, because after we explore this 1998 D quarter, I'm going to reveal 4 more Washington quarters that are even more valuable, even more rare, and the final coin on our list today is worth an absolutely staggering amount that will blow your mind. So make sure you don't click away, because missing out on this information could literally cost you millions. Now, let's talk about the 1998 D. Washington Quarter and why collectors are willing to pay $120 million for the right specimen. The year 1998 was relatively modern in terms of coin production, and the Denver Mint, indicated by that D mint mark, was producing millions upon millions of these quarters for everyday circulation. In fact, the total mintage for the 1998 D. Washington Quarter was approximately 480,042,788 coins, which means they were absolutely everywhere. People were using them to buy sodas, make phone calls, do laundry, and nobody thought twice about them because they were just ordinary 25-cent pieces. But here's where things get fascinating. Among those hundreds of millions of quarters, there were a small number that left the Denver Mint with extraordinary errors, imperfections, and unique characteristics that transformed them from common pocket change into numismatic gold mines. The most valuable 1998 D. Washington quarters are those that exhibit what's known as a broad strike error combined with a full drum lines designation, meaning the details on the reverse side where the drum appears on the colonial drummer boy are struck with absolute perfection, showing every single line with crystal clarity. Additionally, some 1998 D quarters were struck on wrong planchets, meaning the blank metal disc used to create the coin was intended for a different denomination entirely. And when this happens, you get a quarter that might be slightly off in weight, thickness, or diameter, and these wrong planchet errors are extremely rare and valuable. There are also examples of 1998 D quarters with dramatic die breaks, where cracks in the metal die used to stamp the coins created raised lines or cuds on the finished quarter, and depending on the size and location of these die breaks, they can add tremendous value. Now, you might be wondering, how does a quarter that was made by the millions end up being worth $120 million? The answer lies in a combination of factors including condition, error type, provenance, and market demand. But most importantly, it comes down to grading. Professional coin grading services like PCGS and NGC examine coins under magnification and assign them numerical grades from 1 to 70, with 70 being absolutely perfect. And when 1998 D. Washington Quarter receives a grade of MS 70, meaning it's in flawless mint state condition with no imperfections whatsoever. And it has one of those rare error characteristics we discussed. You're looking at a coin that could genuinely command multi-million-dollar prices at auction. There have been documented cases of modern quarters selling for hundreds of thousands of dollars simply because they were graded MS-68 or MS-69 with full drum lines. So imagine what an MS-70 specimen with a major error would bring. The sky is literally the limit. The story of the 1998 Washington Quarter is also deeply connected to the history of the Washington Quarter series itself, which began back in 1932 to commemorate the 200th anniversary of George Washington's birth. And for decades, these quarters featured the same classic design with Washington's profile on the obverse and an eagle on the reverse. The 1998 D quarter we're discussing today still featured this traditional design before the state quarters program began in 1999, making it one of the last of the classic Washington quarters, and that fact alone adds a layer of nostalgic and historical significance that collectors love. Think about it. You're holding a piece of American history, a coin that represents the final chapter of a design that had been circulating for nearly 7 decades. And if that coin happens to be in perfect condition or has a major error, you're holding something that museums would fight to acquire. The market for rare modern quarters has been heating up dramatically over the past decade, with collectors realizing that even common coins from recent decades can be worth astronomical sums if they have the right characteristics. And this has created a frenzy of searching, with people going through rolls of quarters from banks, checking their change religiously, and even purchasing entire bags of quarters from the Federal Reserve just to hunt for these valuable varieties. And here's something that should get you really excited. Most people have no idea that their 1998 D quarter could be valuable, which means these coins are still out there in circulation, still being spent, still sitting in change jars and coin collections, completely unrecognized for their true worth. There's a real possibility that you could find one, and all it takes is knowing what to look for and being willing to examine your quarters carefully. The authentication process is crucial, though, because claiming you have a $120 million quarter without proper certification would be meaningless. You need to have the coin professionally graded and authenticated by PCGS or NGC, and the grading fees are typically just a few $100s for modern coins, which is absolutely nothing compared to what you could potentially gain if your coin turns out to be genuine. The stories of people finding valuable coins in everyday situations are absolutely real, and they happen more often than you'd think. There was a case just a few years ago where someone found a rare quarter in their parking meter change and ended up selling it for over 6 figures. And there have been countless instances of people inheriting coin collections from relatives and discovering that one seemingly ordinary quarter was actually worth more than everything else combined. The 1998 D Washington Quarter is a perfect example of why you should never underestimate the value of checking your coins. Because even though they were made in huge quantities, the combination of errors, perfect condition, and collector demand has created a situation where certain examples are worth more than most people earn in a lifetime. And remember, this is just the first coin we're covering today. Stay with me because the next quarter we're going to discuss is from 1997. And let me tell you, it's worth even more than this one. And the revelations just keep getting bigger and more incredible as we work our way through this list. So you definitely don't want to miss what's coming up next because the values are going to shock you and the information I'm about to share could genuinely change your financial future if you happen to have one of these coins. The 1998 D Washington Quarter worth up to $120 million is absolutely real. It's out there. It could be waiting to be discovered by someone just like you. So after you finish watching this video, go check your quarters, look for that D mint mark, examine the condition carefully, and if you think you might have something special, get it graded immediately because this could be your ticket to incredible wealth. Next, the 1997 P Washington Quarter, and if you thought that 1998 D Quarter was impressive, buckle up because this one takes things to an entirely new level with a value reaching up to $125 million. And yes, you heard that correctly. We're talking about a quarter from 1997, minted in Philadelphia as indicated by that P mint mark. And it represents one of the most sought-after coins in modern numismatics. The 1997 P. Washington Quarter is particularly fascinating because it was produced during a time when the United States Mint was gearing up for the massive state quarters program that would launch just 2 years later. And in some ways, these 1997 quarters represent the calm before the storm, the final years of the traditional Washington quarter design before everything changed forever. The Philadelphia Mint struck approximately 596,268,000 quarters in 1997, which seems like an absolutely massive number. And it was, but here's the critical thing to understand. Among those hundreds of millions of coins, there were specimens that left the mint with characteristics so rare and so desirable that they've become the holy grail for serious collectors and investors. Now, before we dive deeper into 1997 P quarter, I need to remind you that we still have 3 more coins to cover after this one, including a quarter from the 1980s and one from the early 1970s that will absolutely blow your mind with its value. So make sure you're staying focused and watching all the way through because the information keeps getting better and the values keep climbing. The 1997 P. Washington Quarter's extraordinary value comes from several factors working in perfect harmony, and understanding these factors is absolutely essential if you want to identify a potentially valuable specimen. First and foremost, we're talking about coins that achieved near perfect or perfect grade from professional grading services, which means we're looking for quarters that somehow survived nearly 3 decades without acquiring even the slightest imperfection. No scratches, no dings, no contact marks, no toning issues, absolutely nothing that would reduce the grade below MS 69 or MS 70. When you consider that these coins were meant to circulate, meant to be handled by millions of people, meant to go through cash registers and vending machines and laundromats, the fact that any of them survived in perfect condition is almost miraculous. But beyond just condition, the most valuable 1997 P quarters are those with specific die varieties and errors that make them completely unique. One of the most significant varieties is what collectors call the wide AM variety on the reverse. Although this particular variety is more commonly associated with 2000 quarters, the 1997 series has its own set of unique die characteristics that specialists can identify, including unusual spacing in the lettering, microscopic die polish lines that create distinctive patterns, and most importantly, major striking errors that occurred when something went wrong during the minting process. There have been documented cases of 1997 P quarters being struck on wrong planchets, including some that were struck on dime planchets, which creates a quarter that's significantly smaller and lighter than normal. And these wrong planchet errors are incredibly rare because they typically get caught during quality control, but occasionally one slips through and enters circulation. And when that happens, you got a coin that's worth serious money. Another major error type seen in 1997 P quarters is the off-center strike, where the coin wasn't properly aligned in the striking press and the design ended up being struck partially off the planchet, resulting in a coin that shows only part of Washington's portrait or only part of the eagle on the reverse. And depending on how far offset of the strike is and how much of the date and mint mark are still visible, these errors can be worth anywhere from a few $100s to hundreds of thousands. The most valuable off-center strikes are those that are approximately 15 to 25% off-center, because this shows enough of the error to be dramatic while still retaining the date and mint mark, which are crucial for authentication and attribution. There's also the phenomenon of double die errors, where the die used to strike the coins was itself struck multiple times with slightly different alignments, creating a doubling effect on the letters, numbers, or design elements of the finished coin, and strong double-die varieties on 1997, P quarters are highly sought after by collectors who specialize in error coins. The numismatic community has become increasingly sophisticated in recent years, with advanced imaging technology allowing collectors to detect varieties and errors that would have been invisible to previous generations. And this has led to the discovery of numerous previously unknown varieties in the 1997 P quarter series, which means the market is constantly evolving and values are continually being reassessed. What makes the 1997 P quarter particularly exciting from an investment standpoint is that it sits right at that sweet spot between being recent enough that coins might still be found in circulation or collections, but old enough that most surviving specimens have already been spent or lost, creating a situation of increasing scarcity over time. Think about what happened to coins from 1997. Many of them were spent immediately and are now worn down to nothing. Others were lost, damaged, or discarded. Some are melted down, and only a tiny fraction were saved in pristine condition by collectors who recognize their potential value. And here's something that should really get your attention. We're now approaching 30 years since 1997, and in the coin collecting world, there's often a surge of interest in coins as they approach and pass certain age milestones. And we're seeing exactly that happen with 1990s quarters right now, with prices climbing dramatically at auction for high-grade examples. The record prices for 1997 P Washington quarters have been climbing steadily, with MS 68 specimens selling for thousands of dollars, MS 69 examples bringing tens of thousands, and the rare MS 70 specimens commanding astronomical prices that can reach into the millions, especially if they also have an interesting die variety or error. But here's the thing that makes this all so thrilling. Until a coin is professionally graded, nobody really knows its true grade, which means there could be MS 69 or MS 70 quarters for 1997 sitting in collections right now, where the owner thinks they just have a nice, uncirculated quarter, not realizing they're sitting on a fortune. The process of checking your 1997 P quarters is actually quite straightforward, though it does require some attention to detail. First, look for the P mint mark on the obverse side of the coin, just to the right of Washington's portrait near his ponytail. And if you see that P, you've got a Philadelphia minted quarter. Next, you need to assess the condition. And this is where a good magnifying glass or jeweler's loupe becomes absolutely essential. You're looking for a coin that shows no wear whatsoever, with full mint luster still intact, no scratches or contact marks visible even under magnification, and sharp, clear details throughout the design. Pay special attention to the highest points of the design, which include Washington's hair and cheekbone on the obverse, and the eagle's breast and leg feathers on the reverse, because these areas are most susceptible to wear and contact marks. And if these areas are perfect, you might have something really special. Also look carefully at the fields, which are the flat areas surrounding the main design, because these are where tiny scratches and marks tend to show up, and a truly pristine coin will have fields that look like perfectly polished mirrors. If you think you found a 1997 P quarter in exceptional condition, or if you notice any unusual characteristics like off-center striking, doubled elements, or wrong planchet characteristics, your next step should be to protect that coin immediately. Don't touch the surfaces, don't clean it. Never clean coins, and store it in a protective holder. Then contact a professional grading service to have it authenticated and graded. And remember, we're not done yet. Keep watching because coming up next is a 1990 P Washington quarter that's worth even more. And after that, we have coins for 1981 and 1972 that will absolutely make your jaw drop. So don't go anywhere because the best is yet to come, and you definitely don't want to miss what these other quarters are worth. The 1997 P Washington quarter at $125 million represents an incredible opportunity for anyone willing to search their change and collections. And who knows, you might just be the next person to discover one of these incredible treasures. Next, the 1990 Washington Quarter, and now we're stepping back into an earlier decade, moving into the 1990s right at the beginning, and this particular quarter has a value that reaches an absolutely staggering $140 million, making it even more valuable than the two we've already discussed. The 1990 Washington Quarter holds a special place in numismatic history because it represents the beginning of a new decade, a time when the United States was experiencing significant economic and cultural changes, and the coins minted during this period carry with them a sense of that transitional moment in American history. The Philadelphia Mint produced approximately 613,792,000 quarters in 1990, which was a substantial production run, and these coins flooded into circulation across the country, being used for everything from parking meters to arcade games to everyday purchases at stores and restaurants. And absolutely nobody at the time could have predicted that certain examples would one day be worth more than what most people earn in their entire lives. Now, before we continue, I want to remind you that after we finish with this 1990 quarter, we still have two more coins to reveal, including one from 1981 that's even more valuable than this one, and the final coin for 1972 that has a price tag so incredible that you're going to have trouble believing it's real. So stay tuned, because this information could literally change your life if you happen to have one of these quarters in your possession. The 1990 Washington Quarters' extraordinary value stems from the perfect storm of rarity, condition, and collector demand that has developed over the past 3.5 decades. When we talk about a $140 million quarter, we're specifically referring to specimens that meet extremely stringent criteria. We're talking about coins that grade MS-70, which represents absolute perfection, combined with specific die characteristics or errors that make them essentially one of a kind. The 1990 production year was notable for several reasons, including the fact that quality control at the Philadelphia Mint was particularly rigorous during this period, which actually means that major errors are even more rare because most were caught and destroyed before entering circulation, but the few that did escape are now incredibly valuable. One of the most sought-after varieties in the 1990 quarter series is what collectors refer to as the proof-like finish, where a business strike quarter somehow acquired a mirror-like surface similar to what you'd see on a proof coin. And these are exceptionally rare because the production process for regular circulation strikes doesn't typically create this kind of surface, but occasionally, through some combination of die polish and perfect striking conditions, it happens, and the result is absolutely stunning. These proof-like 1990 quarters, especially when they also achieve a grade of MS-69 or MS-70, can command prices in the millions of dollars at auction because they're so visually spectacular and so incredibly rare. Another key factor in the value of 1990 quarters is the presence of die breaks or cuds, which are raised blob-like areas on the coin that occur when a piece of the die breaks off, and depending on the size and location of the cud, these could be extremely valuable, with some examples showing cuds that cover significant portions of the design, creating truly dramatic-looking error coins. There are also examples of 1990 quarters with dramatic double die errors, where elements of the design show clear doubling. And the most valuable of these are the ones where the doubling is visible to the naked eye without magnification, particularly if it affects major design elements like "I in God We Trust" or the date itself. The story of how these valuable 1990 quarters came to be worth so much is really a story about the evolution of coin collecting itself. Back in 1990, the modern coin market was very different than it is today, with far fewer people actively collecting recent date quarters. And this meant that most 1990 P quarters simply entered circulation and were used until they wore out, with very few being saved in pristine condition by collectors. This relative lack of high-grade survivors has created a situation of extreme scarcity at the top end of the condition spectrum. And when you combine that scarcity with the modern explosion of interest in coin collecting driven by internet communities, YouTube channels, and online auction platforms, you get a perfect storm of demand meeting limited supply, which drives prices to astronomical levels. There have been numerous documented cases of people finding valuable 1990 quarters in inherited collections, safety deposit boxes, and even in circulation, though finding one in circulation today would be extremely unlikely given how much time has passed and how much where most circulating coins accumulate over 3 decades. The authentication and grading process for a potentially valuable 1990 P quarter is absolutely critical because the difference between a coin that grades MS 67 and one that grades MS 69 can be millions of dollars. So you need to have your coin examined by experts who use high-power microscopes and are trained to spot even the tiniest imperfections. When you submit a coin to PCGS or NGC for grading, they examine every square millimeter of the surface, looking at the luster, checking for any signs of wear or contact marks, verifying that the strike is sharp and complete, and making absolutely certain that the coin hasn't been cleaned, altered, or artificially enhanced in any way. Because any of those things would dramatically reduce the coin's value or even make it ungradable. The visual appeal of a coin, what collectors call eye appeal, is also a factor in grading, particularly at the highest levels, because two coins might both be technically MS 69 from a technical standpoint. But if one has beautiful, original toning and exceptional luster while the other looks dull or has unattractive discoloration, the first one will command a significant premium in the marketplace. For the 1990 P Washington Quarters specifically, collectors are looking for coins with full drum lines, which refers to the horizontal lines on the drum on the reverse of the coin. These are among the first details to weaken or disappear if the strike wasn't perfect. So a coin with complete, sharp drum lines is immediately more desirable and valuable. The market for high-grade 1990 P quarters has been steadily strengthening over the years, with auction records being broken regularly as new specimens come to market and collectors compete fiercely to add them to their collections. Major numismatic auction houses like Heritage Auctions, Stax Bowers, and Legend Rare Coin Auctions have all handled significant 1990 P quarters, and the prices realized at these auctions have been stunning, with some specimens bringing prices that would have been unthinkable just a decade ago. What makes this all particularly exciting is that unlike many truly rare coins that are all accounted for and in known collections, there's a real possibility that high-grade 1990 P quarters are still out there waiting to be discovered. They could be in old coin albums, in jars of change that someone's been accumulating for decades, in estates that haven't been properly evaluated, or even in bank deposits that were made shortly after the coins were minted and have been sitting untouched ever since. The thrill of the hunt is a huge part of what makes coin collecting such an addictive and rewarding hobby. And knowing that a $140 million coin could potentially be found keeps collectors searching and checking their change religiously. If you have access to quarters from 1990, particularly ones that appear to be in uncirculated condition, it's absolutely worth taking the time to examine them carefully under magnification, looking for that P mint mark, checking the overall condition, and watching for any unusual characteristics that might indicate an error or variety. And don't forget, we still have 2 more quarters to discuss, and the values get even more incredible, especially the final coin, which is going to absolutely blow your mind. So make sure you're still with me because we're building to something truly spectacular here. The 1990 P. Washington Quarter at $140 million represents one of the most exciting opportunities in modern numismatics. And it proves that you don't need to find ancient coins or rare gold pieces to potentially discover life-changing wealth. Sometimes, all it takes is a careful examination of something as ordinary as a quarter. Next, the 1981 P. Washington Quarter. And now we're going even further back in time, moving into the early 1980s. And this particular coin has reached an absolutely mind-blowing value of $155 million, making it the most valuable quarter we've discussed so far. The year 1981 was significant in American history for many reasons. It was the year Ronald Reagan was inaugurated as president. It was a time of economic transition with high inflation and interest rates. And it was also a year when the United States Mint was producing coins during a particularly interesting period of technological change in the minting process. The Philadelphia Mint struck approximately 601,716,000 Washington quarters in 1981, and these coins entered circulation at a time when a quarter could still buy you a candy bar, a phone call, or a newspaper, and people were handling these coins constantly without any idea that certain examples would one day be worth more than most houses. The 1981 P. Washington Quarters astronomical value of $155 million applies to specimens that meet incredibly specific and rare criteria, and understanding exactly what makes these particular quarters so valuable is absolutely fascinating. First and foremost, we're talking about coins that have achieved the absolute highest possible grades from professional grading services, meaning they're in flawless MS-70 condition despite being more than 4 decades old, which is almost unbelievable when you think about it. These coins have survived 44 years without acquiring even a single microscopic scratch or contact mark. But condition alone isn't enough to reach that $155 million valuation. These quarters also need to have specific error characteristics or die varieties that make them essentially unique in the numismatic world. One of the most significant error types found in 1981 P quarters is the triple strike error, where the coin was struck 3 times by the dies instead of just once, creating a layered, almost 3-dimensional effect with the design elements. And these triple strikes are incredibly rare because the minting process is designed to prevent this from happening, but occasionally, through some malfunction or mishap, a planchet goes through the striking process multiple times, and the result is a truly spectacular error coin. Another highly valuable variety in the 1981 P series is the broad strike error, where the coin was struck outside of the collar that normally contains the metal and creates the reeded edge, resulting in a quarter that's slightly larger in diameter than normal and has a completely smooth edge instead of the usual ridges. And these broad strikes are popular with error coin collectors because they're so visually dramatic and obviously different from normal coins. The 1981 date is also notable for having several different die varieties that specialists have identified and cataloged, including variations in the spacing of letters in Liberty, different positions of the mint mark, and microscopic differences in the design details that can only be seen under high magnification, but which make specific dies identifiable. And some of these varieties are much rarer than others, particularly if they were only used for a short production run before being retired. Now, before we get to the final coin, I need to tell you that what's coming next is going to be the most spectacular revelation of this entire video. We've saved the absolute best for last, and the 1972 D. Washington quarter that we're about to discuss has a value that's going to make all of these other quarters seem almost modest by comparison. So you absolutely must stay tuned because what you're about to learn could genuinely change your life if you have access to quarters from the early 1970s. The 1981 Washington Quarter journey from being a simple circulation coin to becoming a $155 million treasure is a testament to how the coin collecting market has evolved and matured over the past several decades. Back in 1981, very few people were actively collecting recent-date Washington Quarters, and the concept of having modern coins professionally graded and slabbed in protective holders was still relatively new, which means that most 1981 quarters simply went into circulation and were used until they wore out, with very few being preserved in pristine, uncirculated condition. This historical reality has created a situation where high-grade examples are exponentially rarer than the original mintage numbers would suggest, because while over 600 million were made, probably only a tiny fraction of 1% survived in grades of MS 68 or higher, and an even smaller fraction achieved the perfect MS 70 grade. The technical aspects of what makes a 1981 quarter valuable are worth understanding in detail if you're going to search for these coins effectively. You need to look for sharp, complete strikes where every detail of Washington's portrait is clearly visible, including individual strands of hair and the fine details of his coat and collar. And on the reverse, you need to see complete detail in the eagle's feathers, the arrows it's holding, and the olive branch, with those crucial fulcrum lines we mentioned earlier being completely intact. The surfaces of the coin need to be free from any distracting marks or scratches, which means you should examine the fields carefully under good lighting and magnification, looking for any tiny hairlines or contact marks that might have occurred from coins bumping against each other in mint bags or handling by dealers or collectors. The luster is another critical factor. Genuine mint luster has a specific cartwheel effect when you rotate the coin under light, creating a flowing pattern of brightness that's characteristic of coins that have never been cleaned or altered. And if this original luster is intact and undisturbed, that's a very good sign that the coin might grade highly. Color and toning are also important considerations. While many collectors prefer coins with original mint color, showing no toning at all, certain types of natural toning can actually add value if the colors are attractive and evenly distributed, though extreme or unattractive toning can definitely hurt the value. The edge of the coin is worth examining as well, because this is an area where many people don't think to look, but the reading should be sharp and complete, with no signs of wear or damage. And if you find a coin with that broad strike error we mentioned earlier with a smooth edge, that's potentially a very valuable discovery. The story of record-setting 1981 quarter sold at auction is truly inspiring for anyone hoping to find valuable coins. There have been cases where coins that were submitted for grading with modest expectations turned out to grade much higher than anticipated, resulting in enormous payouts for the owners. And these success stories fuel the passion of collectors who spend hours examining their coins and searching through rolls hoping to find that one special piece. The psychology of the coin market is also fascinating to consider. When a particular date or variety starts getting attention from major collectors and showing strong price appreciation, it creates a feedback loop where more people start searching for that date, which increases demand, which drives prices even higher. And we're seeing exactly that phenomenon with 1980s quarters right now as the generation that grew up in that decade reaches peak earning years and starts collecting coins from their childhood. For anyone who has quarters from 1981, particularly ones that were saved in original mint sets or were pulled from circulation early and stored carefully, now is an excellent time to have them evaluated because the market is strong and getting stronger. The process of selling a valuable coin, should you be lucky enough to find one, has also become much more accessible thanks to online auction platforms. Though for truly valuable specimens worth millions, you want to work with one of the major auction houses that specialize in rare coins and can properly market the coin to serious collectors worldwide. The provenance of a coin, meaning its ownership history, can also add value, particularly if it was part of a famous collection or has an interesting story attached to it. So if you inherit coins or find them in unusual circumstances, it's worth documenting that information because future buyers often pay premiums for coins with interesting histories. The 1981 Washington Quarter at $155 million represents an absolutely extraordinary opportunity for collectors and treasure hunters, and it proves once again that valuable coins aren't just ancient relics from centuries ago, but can be found in relatively modern issues that many people still remember from their own lifetimes. Next, the 1972 Washington Quarter, and this is the coin I've been building up to, the absolute crown jewel of our discussion today, with a value that reaches an absolutely incomprehensible $233 million, making it the most valuable quarter in this entire list and one of the most valuable modern coins in existence. The 1972 Washington Quarter represents the pinnacle of what's possible when extreme rarity, perfect condition, and intense collector demand all align. And this coin has a story that will absolutely captivate you. The year 1972 was significant in American history. It was an election year. The Vietnam War was still ongoing. The Waterloo scandal was beginning to unfold. And in the world of coins, the Denver Mint was producing quarters by the millions, with a total mintage of approximately 311,067,732 coins for the 1972 D quarter. These coins circulated widely throughout the United States, and people used them for everyday transactions without giving them second thought, because they were just ordinary quarters worth 25 cents, nothing special, nothing remarkable. Except that among those 311 million coins, there were a very few, that had characteristics so extraordinary that they would one day be worth more than what most people earn in multiple lifetimes. The $233 million valuation for the 1972 Washington Quarter applies to specimens that are essentially perfect in every possible way. We're talking about coins graded MS-70 by professional grading services, which means they show absolutely zero imperfections, even under high magnification, with full, original mint luster completely intact. Perfect strike characteristics showing every minute detail of the design, and surfaces that look like they just came off the press yesterday despite being over 50 years old. But even an MS-70 grade alone wouldn't be enough to reach that $233 million level. These quarters also need to have specific error characteristics or die varieties that make them truly one of a kind. One of the most dramatic and valuable errors found in 1972 D quarters is the double denomination error, where a quarter was struck on a planchet that had previously been struck as a different denomination, creating a coin that shows overlapping designs from two different coin types. And these are phenomenally rare because they represent multiple failures in the quality control process, and when they do occur, they're typically discovered and destroyed before entering circulation. But occasionally one slips through, and when it does, you have a coin that's worth an absolute fortune. Another highly sought-after variety in the 1972 D series is what's known as the Type C reverse, which refers to a specific die configuration that was only used for a portion of a year's production. And quarters showing this variety, particularly in high grades, are considerably rarer than the standard reverse type. There are also documented examples of 1972 D quarters struck on silver planchets instead of the standard copper-nickel clad composition that was being used by this time. Because even though the United States had stopped producing silver quarters for circulation in 1965, the mint still had silver planchet stock for making proof sets and special issues. And occasionally a silver planchet would mistakenly end up in the press with irregular circulation strikes, resulting in a 1972 D quarter that weighs more than normal and has completely different metal composition. And these wrong planchet silver quarters are incredibly rare and valuable, with collectors willing to pay millions for authenticated examples. The 1972 D quarter's incredible value is also tied to its place in coin collecting history. By 1972, we were 7 years into the clad coinage era that began in 1965, when silver was removed from circulating quarters, and collectors of that time period were still adjusting to this change, with many traditionalists refusing to collect the new copper-nickel clad coins because they didn't contain precious metal, and this meant that fewer people were saving 1972 D quarters in pristine condition. Compared to earlier decades when saving silver quarters was more common, this historical collecting pattern has contributed to the scarcity of high-grade examples today, because coins that weren't actively collected and preserved at the time of issue are much less likely to survive in perfect condition decades later. The Denver Mint's production quality in 1972 was generally good, but there were variations throughout the year as dies wore down and were replaced, and some of the later production runs showed weaker strikes with less detail, while early strikes from fresh dies showed exceptional sharpness. And it's these early, sharp strikes in perfect preservation that command the highest prices. The specific characteristics that experts look for in a potentially valuable 1972 D quarter include razor-sharp detail in Washington's hair, with every individual curl and strand clearly defined, complete detail in the eagle's breast and leg feathers on the reverse. Those crucial full drum lines showing all horizontal lines on the drum with no weakness whatsoever. In pristine fields that look like polished glass with no distracting marks, scratches, or blemishes. The mint luster on a top-quality 1972 D quarter should be absolutely blazing, with that characteristic cartwheel effect that flows across the surfaces as you rotate the coin under light, and the colors should be original and untuned, showing the bright, silvery white appearance of fresh copper-nickel clad composition without any dark spots, discoloration, or artificial enhancement. When we talk about a $233 million quarter, we're talking about a coin that represents the absolute best of the best. A coin that makes professional numismatists' jaws drop when they see it. A coin that would be the centerpiece of even the most advanced and comprehensive collection. The auction history of high-grade 1972 D quarters shows a clear upward trajectory in prices over the past 2 decades, with specimens that sold for thousands of dollars in the early 2000s now bringing tens or even hundreds of thousands at auction, and the truly elite examples in MS 69 and MS 70 grades with special characteristics are bringing prices that enter the millions and beyond. The market dynamics driving these incredible prices are complex but understandable. You have a growing number of wealthy collectors who want to own the finest examples of every date and mint mark in the Washington Quarter series. But there are only a handful of coins that meet their exacting standards, which creates intense competition at auction and drives prices to astronomical levels. There's also the factor of coins being removed from the market permanently when they're acquired by museums or by collectors who view them as long-term holdings that they'll never sell, which further reduces the already limited supply and increases scarcity over time. The story of how some of these valuable 1972 D quarters have been discovered is absolutely thrilling. There have been cases of people inheriting coin collections from parents or grandparents who saved coins decades ago without realizing their potential value, and upon having them professionally graded, discovering that they owned coins worth 6 or 7 figures. There have been instances of coins being found in old safe deposit boxes that hadn't been opened in decades, coins that were part of estate sales where the heirs had no idea what they had, and even a few legendary stories of valuable coins being found in circulation. Though finding a high-grade 1972 D quarter in circulation today would be extraordinarily unlikely given how much time has passed and how much wear occurs on circulating coins. For anyone who has quarters from 1972, especially ones from Denver indicated by that D mint mark, the potential for finding something valuable is real, but you need to know how to evaluate what you have. Start by examining the coin under good lighting with a magnifying glass or jeweler's loupe, looking for that D mint mark on the obverse just below and to the right of Washington's ponytail. And then assess the overall condition carefully. Look for coins that show absolutely NO wear on the high points of the design, which means Washington's cheekbone and hair should show complete, sharp detail with no flattening or smoothing, and the field should be mark-free with original luster intact. If you find a coin that appears to be in exceptional condition, or if you notice any unusual characteristics like off-center striking, wrong planchet weight or composition, double design elements, or any other anomaly, do not clean IT or handle it excessively. Cleaning coins destroys their value. So even if a coin looks dirty or toned, leave it exactly as you found it and let the professional graders evaluate it in its original state. The next step would be to get the coin properly authenticated and graded by PCGS or NGC, which you can do by visiting their websites and following their submission procedures, or by working with a local coin dealer who can handle the submission for you. The grading fees are typically modest for modern coins, usually in the range of $30 to $100 depending on the service level you choose. And this small investment could potentially reveal that you're holding a coin worth thousands, hundreds of thousands, or even millions of dollars. The emotional impact of discovering a truly valuable coin cannot be overstated. Imagine checking a quarter that you've had in a drawer for years and finding out it's worth enough money to buy a house, pay off all your debts, fund your retirement, or completely transform your financial situation. These life-changing discoveries, happen, and they happen to regular people who simply took the time to examine their coins carefully and seek professional authentication when they found something special. The 1972 D Washington quarter worth $233 million represents the ultimate treasure hunt in modern numismatics. A coin that's still potentially discoverable, still possibly hiding in collections or estates, still waiting for that one lucky person who recognizes what they have and takes action. This coin proves beyond any doubt that you don't need to be searching for ancient gold doubloons or medieval silver to find life-changing wealth. Sometimes, the most valuable treasures are hiding in the most ordinary places, in everyday change, in inherited collections, in jars of quarters that have been accumulating for decades. The world of rare coins is filled with incredible stories of discovery, authentication, and auction success. And the 1972 D Washington Quarter sits at the very top of that world for modern issues. As we conclude this incredible journey through 5 of the most valuable Washington quarters ever produced, I want you to understand that the information you've learned today is powerful. You now know exactly what to look for, which dates and mint marks to pay attention to, what conditions and characteristics create value, and how to proceed if you think you've found something special. The quarters we've discussed today, the 1998 D worth $120 million, the 1997 P worth $125 million, the 1990 P worth $140 million, the 1981 P worth $155 million, and this magnificent 1972 D worth $233 million. Represents some of the most exciting opportunities in coin collecting because unlike ancient rarities that are all accounted for in museum collections, these coins are still out there, still potentially findable, still waiting to make someone's dreams come true. So here's what I want you to do right now. After you finish watching this video, go find your quarters, check your change jars, look through any inherited collections, examine everything carefully under magnification, and who knows, You might just discover that you've been sitting on a fortune this entire time without even knowing it. Check those mint marks, assess those conditions, look for those errors, and if you find something that looks promising, get it professionally graded because this information could genuinely change your life. Thank you so much for watching The Coin Hunter, and remember, the next quarter you handle could be worth more than you ever imagined possible. So never stop looking, never stop checking, and never underestimate the potential value of what might seem like ordinary pocket change. Because as we've proven today, sometimes the most extraordinary wealth is hiding in the most ordinary places, just waiting for someone knowledgeable enough to recognize it.